Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Solomon family. Angela grew up in a religious family in Nashville, USA. She was talented in singing and excelled academically. Then, she earned a doctorate in pharmacy and was successful in her career, which allowed her to earn a good income. She bought a house and lived a fulfilling life. In 2001, she reconnected with Aaron Solomon, a charismatic guy she had known since school. He was a sports presenter on a TV channel and made a good impression on her. The couple started dating, and just a few months later, Angela became pregnant with a son. In 2002, their first child was born, named Grant. Immediately after that, Aaron proposed to Angela, but their relationship was complicated, and she was unsure about marriage. She initially planned to raise the child on her own. However, her religious family pressured her to marry, and she eventually agreed. Aaron turned out to be a caring father and loving husband. And their relationship improved. For years after their wedding, in October 2006, they welcomed a daughter named Gracie. Grant, who was 4 years old at the time, was thrilled to have a younger sister. He stayed by her crib and helped his mother with her care. Then, he began playing baseball and became a successful player on his school team, gaining popularity among his peers. After the birth of Gracie, the parents' relationship worsened. Aaron was a controlling and possessive man who insulted his wife and children while having multiple affairs. He used his status as a presenter to start many affairs. In 2013, 7 years old, Gracie told her mother that her father was bothering her during bath time. It was discovered that Aaron had prohibited his wife from bathing their daughter, insisting on doing it himself, and even filmed his daughter without clothes. Angela forbade Aaron from bathing or touching their daughter. Although he admitted to his actions, he threatened Angela, warning that he would take their children away if Angela told anyone. As an active church member, he demanded complete obedience from his family, so Angela felt compelled to remain silent. Angela finds out that Aaron has cheated on many other girls and learned he was molesting minors. In 2014, explicit photos of minors were found on his phone, but the incident was covered up and he lost his job. However, then he found a new job as a financial consultant at a large bank. The couple began to argue more often. Angela wanted a divorce, but Aaron refused and suggested they see a family psychologist. Angela agreed, and during therapy, it was revealed that she had been dealing with victim syndrome throughout her life. Her parents had been harsh, imposing their religious beliefs on her, and she had entered an unfortunate marriage with Aaron, who was narcissistic and struggled with sexual addiction. The sessions didn't help with their family problems. Angela found another psychologist she trusted and shared all the details of her life and family issues. She started considering a plan to leave Aaron, who was controlling and wouldn't let her go. She kept notes on her phone and communicated with the psychologist via email. However, Aaron was secretly listening to her therapy sessions, checking her phone and email, and was aware of all her plans. She complained to her parents about Aaron's troubling behavior, but they didn't support her. They sided with he, believing, due to their faith, that a woman should endure her husband's behavior and keep the household intact. She felt unsupported by everyone. Aaron's behavior deteriorated, and he started to become violent towards his wife and children. The children, wanting to protect their mother, they began sleeping in the same room out of fear of their father. One day, Aaron attacked Angela in the bathroom, attempting to strangle her with a hairdryer cord. She was ready to say goodbye to life when her 11-year-old son, Grant, intervened and managed to stop his father. Terrified, she and the children chose not to tell anyone about the incident and did not report Aaron to the police. However, he called 911, falsely claiming that she had tried to end your life using the cord. She was then hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, despite asserting that she was mentally sound. Eventually, doctors reassured her that she was indeed healthy. Angela's psychotherapist learned about her situation and shared their correspondence, explaining that Angela was a victim of domestic violence. Angela was discharged from the hospital on May 11, 2013, and was advised to obtain a restraining order against her husband. Medical records confirmed she was not depressed, had no end-of-life thoughts, no history of mental health issues. However, she was indeed a victim of domestic violence and was in a dangerous situation. After her release, Angela was determined to secure a restraining order against her husband and file for divorce. Upon returning home, she found the house empty. She attempted to contact Aaron, but he did not respond. She also tried calling her own parents and his parents, but received no answer. Her relatives dismissed her as mentally ill and ignored her. The next day, May 12, was Mother's Day. Angela hoped Aaron would bring the children to visit her, but instead, the police arrived at her house. He had falsely reported to 911 that she was attempting to end her life. The police checked on her, but they found no cause for concern and left. Time passed, and Angela received a restraining order but still did not know where the children were. She contacted the police several times, asking them to locate the children, but they refused to take her statement because the children were with their father, Darren, who had the legal right to have them. He had not kidnapped them. She soon discovered that he had filed for divorce first and had obtained a restraining order against her. He claimed she was a danger to him and the children. Divorce proceedings began, and both his parents and her parents spoke against her. As a result, he was granted full custody of the children, and the court ordered she to pay child support. The children were not present in court and were not asked with whom they wanted to stay. The judge noted that she had been in a mental hospital, which was enough to deny her custody claims. She couldn't do anything about her children. Angela continued to live with her father and fought hard to challenge the guardianship, arguing that the children were not well with Aaron. A retrial for the guardianship case was scheduled. He hired top lawyers for the case, having recently received a large inheritance from a wealthy aunt who had passed away. During the trial, Angela's relatives once again testified against her, alleging she was intent to end her life. However, this time, psychotherapists and staff from the psychiatric hospital defended her. They confidently stated that she was a victim of Aaron's abusive behavior and had never attempted to end her life. Her injuries were inflicted by her husband. Despite this, the judge ignored their testimony and awarded full custody to Aaron. Angela did not give up and repeatedly challenged the custody decision, eventually securing the right to see her children for 2 hours a week. When she finally saw them, she was shocked by their condition. Both Grant and Gracie had lost weight, and Gracie had severe bruises under her eyes. Aaron disciplined them harshly, using physical violence, enforcing a strict diet, and banning unhealthy and sweet foods. Grant once jumped out of a moving car to escape from his father and was injured. The children were told by their father that their mother, Angela, was dead when she was actually placed in a mental hospital. He also said it was unsafe there, so they needed to move. The children believed their father at the time because they saw their mother in a bad state after being strangled and felt hopeless, thinking no one could help them. Angela fought to gain full custody of the children, which required her to undergo a psychiatric examination to prove her mental health. She passed the examination successfully. In 2014, the court increased Angela's child visitation rights to 6 hours per week, but kept the children with their father. She continued her legal battle. In early 2015, Angela received devastating news. Aaron had been raping 9-year-old Gracie for several months. The frightened girl felt she couldn't tell anyone. She described feeling sleepy and falling asleep after eating. Then she wake up in her father's bed with severe pain in her crotch and bruises on her thighs. She didn't know how the bruises got there. Her father, Aaron, claimed it was a rash from her bathing suit, but she knew that wasn't true. He never took them to the doctor, fearing exposure, even when they were very sick. Gracie recounted how Aaron beat them, drove recklessly to scare them, and neglected their basic needs. Angela was horrified by this information and tried to use it to gain custody of the children from Aaron, their abusive father, awaiting a new trial. In April 2015, Aaron filed a complaint against Angela for not paying child support, leading to her arrest. She argued that Aaron was not properly caring for the children and was using the child support money for himself and his lovers, despite having inherited wealth. Angela was later released and continued to pay child support. She fought for her children for several more years, reporting Aaron to law enforcement, contacting his church, and warning the church school about the danger he posed. However, no one took her seriously, and everyone thought she was crazy. In 2018, Grant and Gracie ran away from home. Aaron immediately contacted the police, and the children were found quickly. When they returned, Aaron punished them harshly. Angela, upon discovering this, requested an emergency custody hearing due to Aaron's abusive behavior. On August 17, 2018, during Grant's baseball tournament, Aaron and Gracie came to watch the match. After the match, Aaron took Gracie with him, while Grant stayed at the sports camp. Aaron rented a hotel room with only one bed for the night. Despite 12-year-old Gracie's request for a room with 2 beds, Aaron raped her that night. The following day, on August 18, an emergency custody hearing took place. Gracie disclosed what her father had done, but Aaron's lawyer denied the allegations, suggesting that Gracie imagined the incident and arguing that Aaron, being a loving father, couldn't have committed such an act. Later, Grant testified that his father was abusive, beat him, fed him poorly, humiliated him, and forced him to train all day. Both children expressed their desire to live with their mother, not their father. However, the judge did not believe them. He concluded that Angela and the children were lying to damage Aaron's reputation because Aaron attended the same Grace Church as the judge and a senator, where he was well regarded. This was a closed, deeply religious community. Aaron attended church every Sunday, never missing an event, and was well regarded by the community's elite. People couldn't believe that Aaron was capable of such monstrous behavior. And there is no evidence that he abused the children. The judge dismissed Angela's request for custody. During the trial, Gracie clung to her mother and was reluctant to leave with her father. However, when her father threatened to call the police, she had no choice but to go with him. The mother lost custody rights, but the children were unable to stay with their father either. Gracie and Grant sought help from school staff, a psychologist, and the church, sharing the terrible things their father had done to them. However, the principal called them in and urged them to remain silent to protect both their and their father's reputations. Despite their efforts to explain why they didn't want to return home, the principal dismissed their claims, saying he had heard it all before and didn't believe them. He contacted their father, who then removed them from school. Nobody believed the children, as everyone thought Angela had coerced them into falsely accusing their father. One day, Gracie and Grant couldn't take it anymore and ran to their mother, Angela. Then, Aaron came to look for them and asked them to return. Grant and Gracie refused, and he allowed them to live temporarily with their mother. With the help of therapy, they set boundaries, and their father began to respect them. Grant and Gracie sometimes had to live with their father, as he still had more custody rights, but most of the time they lived with their mother. During those times, they were happy, and the relationship with their father became more tense and reached its peak. On July 20, 2020, 18-year-old Grant was driving to his training, which was about an hour away from Angela's house. Upon arriving at the parking lot, a tragic accident occurred in which Grant lost his life. His father, Aaron, who was also at the training, witnessed the incident. He immediately called 911 for help for his son. Aaron later recounted the event. Aaron explained that he had exited his pickup truck to retrieve his gear from the back. While standing in the parking lot near the building, he was focused on his phone and did not notice the pickup rolling backwards. The vehicle hit him, dragging him several meters before it went down a deep ditch. Aaron, who was there with 3 others, saw everything unfold. When the police arrived, they found Grant lying on his back beneath the front of a car, but the tires were not touching him. Blood was streaming from his nose and ears. Using a jack, they managed to lift the car and pulled him out. He was still breathing, so they performed CPR and rushed him to the hospital. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, Grant, who was in serious condition, died on the way without regaining consciousness. Although he had multiple injuries, but the official cause of death was cardiac arrest. Strangely, Aaron accompanied him to the hospital and signed papers preventing an autopsy and organ donation. When Angela learned about the incident, she hurried to the hospital and requested an autopsy, but her pleas were ignored. The police classified the case as an accident and didn't pursue further investigation. Angela believed Aaron's account of the incident was false, pointing to various inconsistencies. Grant's injuries didn't match those of someone trapped under a car. He had no typical crushing injuries. The hospital recorded just 1 head injury and 3 bruises, on his jaw, left hip, and right hip. Aaron claimed Grant drove a pickup for about an hour to reach his training, yet there were no burn marks from a hot car, nor were there abrasions from being dragged on asphalt. At the scene of the tragedy, there was no blood, and Grant's shoes were completely clean, which contradicted Aaron's story. The grass near the car's exit and the path where the body was dragged were untouched. There weren't even tire tracks where they should have been. Instead, they were found on the other side of the sidewalk. Grant's glasses were discovered there too. He always wore his glasses because he had poor vision without them, shown in all his photos. So, how did his glasses end up on the sidewalk if he wasn't there? He was in the parking lot. Why didn't his glasses fall there when the car allegedly ran over him? According to Aaron, Grant had his back to the car and didn't see it coming when it moved in reverse. Strangely, Grant was found lying on his back under the car but in the opposite direction. How could his body have turned 180 degrees under the car? It seems impossible. Furthermore, how could the car back into the ditch and then get back up and out of the ditch? It was hard to believe. None of the people in the nearby buildings heard Grant's screams, which should have been heard during such an accident. Everything happened quietly, so no one saw or heard anything. There were no CCTV cameras, and the 3 guys Aaron mentioned on the call were not there either. Strangely, Aaron did not attempt to rescue his son from the car, even though Aaron was briefly with him. Aaron just watched as his son died. Grant never stored equipment in the back of the car. He always left his uniform on the back seat. The phone Aaron claimed Grant was using was never found. Although Grant always carried his phone with him and called his girlfriend every morning, he didn't call that day for some reason. There was no damage to the car. Even though the rear bumper of this car model is fragile and prone to breaking, it was intact. It would have been damaged in such a descent. There were no witnesses to this tragic accident. A man saw Aaron walking along the road shortly before the tragedy, in the parking lot. It's unclear what he was doing there, although Aaron claimed he arrived later. At his son's funeral, Aaron described his death as a divine act, leaving everyone surprised. People were shocked by Aaron's lack of emotion. He showed no grief for his son. Angela suspected that he may have hit their son with his car elsewhere and staged the accident by bringing their son to the location afterwards. There was confusion as to why the pickup truck unexpectedly rolled away, as it had been parked correctly and had no previous issues. It was speculated that the truck might have had a technical fault, and although Aaron initially suggested investigating it to sue the manufacturer for compensation, he eventually declined, which was out of character for him since he usually pursued financial gains. He continued to drive the truck without any concern for several months. Angela wanted to investigate the truck herself, but Aaron strongly opposed the idea and promptly sent the vehicle to the scrapyard. This was puzzling, as the truck was in excellent condition and could have been sold for a good price. Angela managed to locate the vehicle in spring 2021 and arranged for an independent examination. Experts concluded that the accident could not have occurred as Aaron had claimed. Angela then pushed for the investigation of the case, which had been closed, to be reopened. Grant had just turned 18, according to Angela, and he had always protected Gracie's from their abusive father. He warned his father that as soon as he turned 18, he would go to court. He and his sister Gracie planned to formally free themselves from their father's control, believing the court would take them more seriously as adults. In Angela's opinion, Aaron feared this and decided to stop his son. Gracie was devastated by the loss of her beloved brother, who could protect her. On May 12, 2021, Gracie, then 14, uploaded an 18-minute video on YouTube in which she described her father, Aaron, as a monster. She claimed that he attempted to kill their mother, raped her, and physically abused both her and Grant, eventually killing Grant's. Gracie fears that her father might harm her now that her brother is gone. They are defenseless, and their father started harassing them. Despite a restraining order, Aaron continued to stalk she and begged her to return home, but she refused. She was granted legal protection, but her father ignored it and kept following her from school. Due to the school principal's friendship with he from church, they refused to enforce the restraining order. After this interview, Aaron once again complained that Gracie was being negatively influenced and turned against him. He persuaded she that she imagined everything and that her mother had suggested the idea of rape. Aaron filed a defamation lawsuit against Angela, gathering people who refuted the information in the video Gracie recorded. He claimed Angela demanded he give up custody and threatened him. Angela was determined to seek justice. At the trial, Aaron withdrew the lawsuit but is considering refiling with a new legal team. Angela and her daughter Gracie are striving for justice for Grant. Gracie prefers to live with her mother and not see her father. They launched a website and gathered support from many people after Grant's death. However, the pastor, the school principal, and other individuals denied any involvement. One of Grant's classmates mentioned that she, along with Gracie, asked the school administration to intervene and protect them from Aaron, but the school dismissed their request, saying it was beyond their responsibility. In Tennessee, there is a law requiring anyone who suspects child abuse to report it to the Department of Children. However, no one reported anything in this case. After Grant's death, students were not allowed to discuss the tragedy at school. Later, the pastor left the church, causing a significant split within the congregation. Currently, Aaron has not been charged with any crimes related to Grant, and he denies all accusations against him. Aaron's supporters occasionally post on social media, accusing Gracie and Angela of lying and behaving unchristianly. Angela and Gracie live together but are afraid of Aaron. Gracie aspires to become an FBI agent to help people through investigations. The tragic story of the Solomon family leaves behind many painful and unforgettable lessons about domestic abuse and violence, as well as society's indifference to victims. Through this story, we clearly see the need to protect children and vulnerable family members from abusive acts. At the same time, the importance of support from the community and authorities is also emphasized. Let's speak up together and protect the vulnerable so that no family has to endure such pain again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Corey Desmond. Corey Desmond was born on March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Corey underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Corey described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Corey earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Corey's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, a notice arrived in the mail confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Corey was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Corey had formed close bonds with her coworkers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Corey finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Corey was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck, and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Corey's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Corey's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Corey's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Corey was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Corey's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Corey's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Corey's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Corey had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Corey's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Corey was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Corey worked as a waitress. They spoke with her coworkers, who revealed that Corey had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Corey, as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Corey and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Corey assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Corey's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Corey stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Corey went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened, and even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Corey left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Corey before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Corey Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Corey. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Corey had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Corey never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Corey might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Corey died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Corey didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Corey's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Corey was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Corey's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Corey Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Corey Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Corey's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Corey's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Corey's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Corey's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Corey, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Corey's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Corey's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station, without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Corey, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Corey had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Corey's death, Tony placed her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Corey's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Corey while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Corey's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Corey's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Corey's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the extent of Corey's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Corey, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Corey resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle, and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Corey, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Corey's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of April Tinsley. April Tinsley was born on March 18, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as the eldest child in her family. She attended elementary school and was involved in the local church's children's choir, but her true passion was socializing with friends, exploring the neighborhood, and simply enjoying herself. On Friday, April 1, 1988, 8-year-old April returned home from school early, eager to start her afternoon adventures. After lunch, she asked her mom if she could visit her friend Nicole, who lived just a few hundred yards away. Her mom consented, as she had many times before. Nicole's house was a short, familiar walk away, and their neighborhood was considered a safe haven. As April set off, her mom reminded her to call as soon as she arrived at the Coles house and handed her an umbrella, anticipating the impending rain. A few minutes later, April called her mom from the Coles house, and her mom instructed her to be back home by 4 p.m. However, when the appointed time came and went, April still hadn't returned. Her mom began to worry that she might get caught in the rain and called Nicole's house. Nicole's mom answered, saying that April and her daughter had gone to play at a nearby playground. While they were there, it started to rain, and April realized she had left her umbrella at Nicole's house. April told Nicole she would walk to her house, retrieve the umbrella, and then head home, as she had promised her mom. Nicole, on the other hand, decided to visit another friend's house, and the girls went their separate ways. However, when Nicole's mom informed April's mom that April never stopped by to get the umbrella, despite leaving the playground almost an hour ago, April's mom immediately grew concerned. She alerted her husband that their daughter was missing, and they set out to search for her. Several neighbors joined in upon hearing about April's disappearance, and together they combed all the streets connecting Nicole's house, the playground, and their home. But they found no sign of her. The parents then decided to contact the police. Officers arrived at the Tinleys' home, obtaining a photo and description of April, and promptly launched a search effort. Within hours, dozens of neighbors joined the search party, eager to help the family locate their daughter. The search area spanned several miles around April's usual route, but despite their efforts, no signs of her were found. As night descended, the police began to suspect that they were likely dealing with a kidnapping, reasoning that if April had simply gotten lost, she would have been located by now. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The next day, the search area was broadened, and news of April's disappearance swept through the city. Despite an influx of police and volunteers joining the effort, they still couldn't find her or any leads. This continued for 3 days until April 4th, when a jogger phoned 911, reporting a disturbing discovery. While running along a road about 20 meters from April's home, he had noticed something peculiar in a ditch. As he drew closer, he realized it was a human body. The police rushed to the scene and confirmed the worst. It was April Tinsley. She was fully clothed, except for one shoe. Officers couldn't find any obvious signs of trauma on her body, but they were almost certain she had been murdered. They theorized that an unknown perpetrator had killed her elsewhere, then brought her to this field and left her body in a ditch. Police also discovered an adult toy nearby, although they weren't sure if it was linked to the case. Later, they found April's second shoe lying on the other side of the road, a few hundred yards from her body. Medical experts determined that April's death was caused by asphyxiation, and she had also been sexually assaulted. They established that her death had occurred within the 48 hours preceding the discovery of her body, indicating that the perpetrator had held her captive for some time. Although forensic science and DNA analysis were still in their infancy, experts managed to collect evidence from the body. However, the lack of a DNA database at the time meant detectives had to rely on new leads. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long after the body was found. Investigators appealed to the public through the media, and numerous tips were received. 2 tips, in particular, caught their attention. One individual contacted the police, reporting that he had driven past the field where April's body was found and noticed an old blue pickup truck parked on the side of the road. Investigators believed it could belong to the killer, and the witness might have seen it when the perpetrator dumped April's body in the ditch, making this lead even more valuable. A woman living along the route from the playground to Nicole's house reported seeing a girl resembling April on the day of her disappearance. According to the witness, as the girl walked along the road, an old blue pickup truck pulled up beside her, and, a few seconds later, it drove away with the girl on board. Although the car obstructed her view, the witness couldn't see exactly how the girl got inside. This tip became the first significant lead for investigators, who were also provided with a description of the driver: a white man around 30 years old with blonde or ginger hair. Based on this information, police created a sketch of the suspect and distributed it to the media, along with a description of his vehicle, hoping someone would recognize him. The FBI soon joined the investigation, and together with the police, they looked into the possible involvement of all men who had previously been convicted of sexual crimes living in April's area, seeking new leads. At some point, they were informed that the suspect's portrait resembled a man who had been involved in organized crime activities and had an interest in Satanism. Investigators checked on this individual, but couldn't establish his involvement. However, they arrested him for another offense unrelated to April's disappearance. Police continued to pursue leads and investigate numerous individuals, but they failed to make any significant breakthroughs. This stagnant state persisted for several months, and eventually, detectives hit a dead end. Notably, during the course of the investigation, police uncovered several other crimes against children and apprehended the perpetrators, but the individual responsible for April's murder remained at large. In the following years, the case saw no major advancements. But in May 1990, a sudden and unexpected twist emerged. A teenage boy living 10 miles from where April's body was discovered found a message on his shed written from the perspective of the perpetrator. The killer confessed to April's murder, hinting at further crimes to come, and inquired about the status of the victim's second shoe. This prompted detectives to suspect that the author was likely April's killer rather than a prankster. The discovery was significant because the detail about the victim's shoe being found several hundred yards from her body had never been released to the media, making it unlikely that anyone but the killer would know this. Another fascinating aspect of the message was that it had initially been written in pencil and then traced over in marker. This led investigators to theorize that the perpetrator may have left the message months prior to its discovery and then returned to make it more conspicuous by outlining it in marker. Police decided to release photos of the cryptic message, hoping someone would recognize the handwriting, but unfortunately, it didn't yield any breakthroughs. Just a few months later, the residents of Wayne were left reeling by the shocking news that police had discovered the body of a 7-year-old girl in another part of the city. She had been sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was asphyxiation. Given the eerie parallels to April's case, police instinctively suspected that the same perpetrator was behind this heinous crime. However, FBI profilers disagreed, convinced that they were dealing with two separate offenders. Despite their efforts, no progress was made in either case until 1995, when police finally linked the second victim's murder to a family friend who had since passed away. As a result, the case was closed, and investigators ceased to consider it related to April's murder. Detectives waited for the perpetrator to make contact again, as his initial message suggested he reveled in mocking the police and flaunting his apparent impunity. However, as the years went by, no new messages surfaced. The case remained stagnant until 2004, when it took a dramatic turn. A Fort Wayne girl discovered a plastic zip bag in her bike basket containing a chilling note that left her shaken. She promptly showed it to her parents, who alerted the authorities. The note read, "Hello dear, I've been watching you. I'm the one who kidnapped, assaulted, and killed April Tensley. I have a gift for you. You'll be my next victim if you don't report this to the police, and I don't see this note in tomorrow's local news. I'll destroy your home, killing everyone but you. You'll be mine." The police had no doubt that the note's author was indeed April's killer. Inside the bag with the note was a used condom sent to the laboratory for analysis. By 2004, DNA profiling had become a routine tool, and experts had already extracted a profile from the semen found on April's body. Now the analysis revealed that the biological sample from the condom matched the same individual, but he was not in the FBI database. The police reopened April's case and soon received a report of a second note. Another girl had found a plastic bag containing a similar message, including a used condom with the same man's DNA. The perpetrator had written that he had killed April Tinsley and threatened to kill this girl as well. In the following months, the police received 2 more calls about similar notes found by other girls. This time, the perpetrator had attached Polaroid photos of his genitalia, which investigators examined for clues. Although all they noticed was a green pattern on the bedsheet in the background, they tried to locate stores selling similar bedding, but it didn't lead to a breakthrough. Within just a few months, the perpetrator had left a total of 4 notes, but then fell silent for years. Once again, in 2009, the FBI released a detailed profile of the killer, including witness-identified physical characteristics, but unfortunately, it yielded no leads. For Fort Wayne investigators, this case remained a top priority for several compelling reasons. Firstly, and most importantly, they were driven to achieve justice and bring the perpetrator who took April's life to account. The killer's audacity was further demonstrated by his taunting messages to the police, which suggested he believed he would never be caught, and his threats against other girls. In a brazen move, he left behind his DNA for detectives to find, providing them with numerous biological samples. However, despite the wealth of evidence, April's killer remained absent from the FBI's database over the years, indicating he had avoided serious criminal convictions and continued to live freely. In 2012, a popular television program about unsolved crimes featured April's case, generating a fresh wave of tips, but each one ultimately led to a dead end. In 2015, detectives reopened the investigation and turned to Parabon, a company that provided law enforcement agencies with a novel service, creating portraits of individuals based on their DNA samples. This innovative approach had already successfully solved several cases. Investigators shared the portrait of the suspect in April's case online and with the media, hoping someone would recognize the person. However, luck was not on their side, and they didn't receive any valuable leads, but the police remained determined. Years later, in 2018, they contacted Parabon again, this time to explore genetic genealogy, a pioneering approach. This method involves experts taking a DNA sample and scouring publicly available genetic databases for any relatives of the DNA owner, no matter how distant. They typically find thousands of people, then study their family trees to identify someone who matches the perpetrator's criteria, such as gender, age, location at the time of the crime, and more. The unique aspect of this method is that the DNA owner doesn't need to be in a database. They can be identified solely through a long chain of relatives. Detectives working on April's case sent the killer's DNA sample to Parabon once again, waiting patiently for the results. The process of tracing relatives and studying their family trees was a lengthy one, requiring experts to sift through vast amounts of data over several months. Eventually, they informed the detectives that they had traced the DNA lineage to two brothers living in Fort Wayne. Now, the police had to determine which of the brothers was the killer. They placed both men under surveillance, collecting their trash in the hopes of extracting DNA samples. It wasn't long before the experts called the detectives with the long-awaited news. 30 years after the murder, they had found a perfect match. The DNA taken from the victim's body and the condoms matched the DNA of one of the brothers, 59-year-old John Miller, who lived in the small town of Grail, not far from where April's body was found. At the time of the murder, he was 29 years old and resided in the same trailer. The police decided to obtain a direct DNA sample from Miller and interrogate him. When they arrived at his trailer and asked him to accompany them to the station, he astutely guessed they were there about April Tinsley. On the way to the station, Miller engaged in small talk, appearing remarkably relaxed. At the interrogation, Miller neither denied nor contested the allegations and confessed to abducting, sexually assaulting, and murdering April. He claimed to have deliberately targeted Fort Wayne, spotting April on a deserted street and telling her to get into his car, to which she silently acquiesced. He then took her to his trailer, where he assaulted and killed her before dumping her body. Miller's lawyer advised him to plead not guilty to protract the legal process. However, he was offered a deal. In exchange for admitting guilt, the death penalty would be commuted to an 80-year prison sentence. Miller accepted the deal, admitted his guilt, and received the 80-year sentence. April's mother was disappointed that Miller escaped the death penalty, but given his advanced age, it is unlikely he will ever be released. April's father, on the other hand, thanked the investigators for their tireless efforts in finding his daughter's killer. The detectives believe Miller had a motive for wanting to be caught. He deliberately courted attention, taking risks such as leaving DNA samples at the crime scene. They suspect he was either prepared to be found out or actively sought it. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Agnieszka Klavina. According to official figures, more than tens of millions of people go missing year around the world. About a third of them are found alive and unharmed. Nearly half are eventually discovered deceased due to accidents or murders. Approximately 2 million individuals vanish without a trace each year. These cases often remain unresolved for many years, with the individuals found neither alive nor dead. The story Agnes Kavina garnered attention in the fall of 2014. A young and very attractive woman who was enjoying an evening out at a club with friends seemed to vanish into thin air. Everyone who might have been involved appeared to evade any responsibility. However, in 2023, 9 years after the incident, the case took an unexpected turn. Agnes Kavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Latvia's capital city, Riga. She grew up in a typical family. Agnes was the youngest of 2 daughters. Her sister Greta was only a couple of years older, leading to a close and nearly inseparable bond between them. Their parents endeavored to provide both daughters with quality education and ample opportunities to pursue their dreams. Agnes emerged as a sociable, cheerful, and very active individual from an early age. She excelled academically, engaged in sports activities, and had a wide circle of friends. Her aspirations for the future included careers linked with tourism or entertainment, passions driven by her love for travel, and her knack for organizing perfect leisure time. Furthermore, Agnes possessed striking looks and an impressive physique that garnered considerable male attention and constant compliments from admirers vying for her notice. After high school graduation, Agnes worked temporarily in the service industry while attending language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At age 20, she decided to leave her homeland and relocate to London, often referred to as the Foggy Albion. She believed relocating would open up more prospects and opportunities to develop her full potential and talents. In London, she sought to build on her ambition, fueled by greater professional opportunities and cultural experiences unavailable in Latvia. Her parents and older sister didn't oppose her decision. They supported her sincerely. Soon after the move, the beautiful blonde met a young man named Michael Mills. He was 8 years older than Agnes, had a good education, and owned a thriving business. Michael had opened a small movie theater and entertainment complex. He was considered very successful. Agnes and Michael quickly found common ground and began dating. Michael courted Agnes beautifully, giving her expensive gifts. They traveled together and made ambitious plans for their future. The couple seemed truly in love and happy. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She appeared radiant beside Michael and dreamed of becoming his lawful wife soon. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month labor contract as an administrator at one of the largest, most popular nightclubs in Marbella, Spain. Naturally, this job implied moving temporarily to another country. However, the ambitious young woman didn't want to miss this opportunity at all. Michael couldn't leave everything behind to go with her because of his job, but he wasn't against her accepting the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to try herself in a new field of activity, gain invaluable experience, and possibly develop further in this direction. Marbella is renowned as one of the most famous and attractive resorts on the Mediterranean coast. Vacationers from different parts of the world come here, mostly wealthy people, seeking fun and looking to spend money. One frequently encounters show business stars, as well as famous athletes and businessmen. Agnes, who has always been very sociable, enjoyed working in such an environment. Before moving, she visited her family in Latvia to inform them that she had signed a favorable employment contract for 3 months. She and Michael were planning their marriage. Dad, Mom, and her sister were genuinely happy for Agnes and wished her luck. At the end of May 2014, Agnes packed only the essentials for 1 season and went to work in sunny Spain. Her lover stayed in London, but they called each other daily and communicated via video link, sharing everything that was happening in their lives. Agnes actively maintained her profiles on various popular social networks. She posted daily photos, small videos, and stories. She garnered many followers who closely followed her activities and work. It was evident that Agnes was living an engaging and busy life that she enjoyed every day. After the end of her employment contract, she decided to remain in Spain for a couple more months. It was the beginning of the velvet season at the resort, which presented an opportunity to earn good money. She consulted her boyfriend about this decision. He supported her and promised to visit because they had missed each other. Agnes quickly secured a job as a hostess in a high-end restaurant and renewed her lease. Michael visited her in September as planned. They enjoyed their time together, planned their wedding, and chose a honeymoon destination. Less than a week later, Michael returned to London while Agnes continued working in Spain for another month. She planned to visit her relatives before flying back to England to reunite with her lover. Sadly, these plans were not destined to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went with friends to a popular nightclub on the Costa del Sol. A few hours earlier, she had informed her fiancé of her plans. He did not object to Agnes enjoying herself with friends. They had fun, took pictures together, which Agnes posted on her online profile that night. According to those who saw her on that fateful evening, she wore a stunning short dress and carried a tiny white clutch handbag. Toward morning, as the friends were preparing to go home, Agnes mentioned she planned to stay a little longer and then take a cab. She was always quite serious and responsible, and she hadn't had much to drink. So her companions saw no reason for concern at that moment. When the friends said goodbye and headed for the exit, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail and appeared eager to gain her favor. After that night, Agnes was never seen again. It seemed as though she had simply vanished into the crowded nightclub. No one could recall what time or with whom the blonde left the establishment or where she went afterward. The next day, Agnes did not show up at work. When attempts to contact her were made, it became clear that her phone was switched off. Concerned colleagues and friends were the first to raise the alarm, but found that the police were slow to respond to their report of a missing person. Toward evening, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother. He explained that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, a situation that had never occurred before. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance. However, they were informed that relatives had to file such a report in person for it to be considered. After hearing this, Michael and Agnes's family took the next flight to Marbella. In the end, the missing persons report was filed by them 5 days after Agnes disappeared without a trace. The first place checked was the apartment Agnes had rented. It appeared as though she had simply stepped out briefly and would return soon. Documents, money, and some expensive pieces of jewelry remained in place. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared food items, and on her bed lay several outfits from which she seemingly chose what she wore on her last night out. It became evident that Agnes hadn't returned home since going out with friends. Her phone was turned off. She left no posts on social media and did not respond to any messages. It wasn't until then that the police started looking into Agnes's disappearance, but unfortunately, precious time had already been lost. Friends and family of Agnes began putting up flyers around the city with her picture, asking for help in locating her. The media picked up the story. Her images featured on television news and made it to the front pages of local newspapers. The leads and clues emerged after police examined footage from CCTV cameras, both inside and outside the entertainment venue. However, there were issues because by then, all files had been erased. Authorities needed specialists and assistants to retrieve them. Their efforts weren't wasted because a camera at the exit to the parking lot showed Agnes around 6 a.m. leaving the club with a man, and it was clear this wasn't of her own accord. This last footage showing Agnes alive was scrutinized in detail. The closer experts looked, the more alarming it appeared. Agnes was being led by a large man, and it was evident she was walking under duress since he held her tightly by the waist. She appeared scared, attempted to break free several times, and spoke emotionally, but the man persistently directed her towards the parking lot, where he practically forced her into his Mercedes A63. When this large man pushed her into the car, another man was already inside while he moved towards the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the car door trying to escape, but at that moment, a doorman nearby intervened as instructed by a gesture from the driver. The doorman pushed her back into the car before receiving an apparent cash reward from the driver for his assistance. Approximately 6 minutes after Agnes entered the vehicle, her phone was switched off and hasn't been turned on since then. Tracking further movement of the vehicle proved impossible due to lack of CCTV coverage along their route. It became obvious that these men were likely among those who last saw Agnes before she went missing. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the outset. Everyone involved in the investigation signed non-disclosure agreements, and information was tightly controlled. Not only was the press kept at bay, but even Agnes's loved ones received almost no updates. For the first few months, her parents and fiancé were left in the dark. They were simply told that an investigation was underway and that it's too early to draw any conclusions. Given that Agnes not communicated in this period, there was little hope she was still alive. Michael periodically gave interviews pleading for assistance to find his fiancée. However, no responses to his appeals were forthcoming. It wasn't until 6 months later that relatives were shown footage from club cameras and provided with the names of the 3 men last seen with Agnes. The large man who forcibly took Agnes out of the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a well-known and influential British millionaire. In the passenger seat sat his longtime associate Craig Porter, who had no particular occupation and frequently appeared on police radar. The third individual was a doorman named Shion Usman. Both Porter and Usman stated under interrogation that they were innocent, asserting that Agnes had entered the car willingly. According to Capper, he and his friend noticed a beautiful blonde woman at the club and approached her to introduce themselves. They claimed she was already fairly drunk, contradicting her friend's statements, but didn't refuse a drink when offered one by Capper. Wesley then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, an invitation Agnes allegedly accepted. However, they asserted that while en route, Agnes changed her mind about attending Wesley's party and asked to be dropped off in the middle of their journey, saying she would take a cab home instead. The man asserted that he had dropped the passenger off at her requested location, an unlit stretch of road. This area notably lacked CCTV cameras. Craig Porter, however, could neither confirm nor deny Wesley Capper's words. According to his confession, he was also very drunk and unaware of when or how Agnes was in their car. He mentioned falling asleep immediately after departing the parking lot. The third suspect, doorman Sean Usman, corroborated that Agnes Kavina appeared intoxicated but could not state whether she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car came to a stop, she opened the door and nearly fell out due to her condition. At the driver's request, Usman closed the door and received a substantial tip for his actions. When questioned about whether the woman's actions suggested an escape attempt, he indicated he did not believe so and attributed it to her intoxication. He added that Agnes neither screamed nor sought help. Footage later surfaced showing Wesley Capper leading Agnes into the car by her waist and wrist with considerable force. His defense was that Agnes felt dizzy and he was simply holding her to prevent a fall. Subsequent investigation uncovered another curious yet disturbing video from Soto Grande in southern Spain at the port of Puerto de la Dua. This footage featured John Capper's luxury yacht being moored there. John Capper is a millionaire and father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, it shows Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding the yacht carrying a large suitcase, which appeared quite heavy, as well as a rolled-up carpet. Upon their return to Puerto de la Dua a few days later, they had no luggage with them. He claimed that he and his friends had sailed to Ibiza to have fun. The suitcase, he said, contained their belongings, and what the investigation mistook for a carpet was actually bedding. Where it all subsequently went, he could not explain. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and automobile yielded no results, as both had been cleaned and dry cleaned, as how destroying any traces of DNA. However, a long blonde hair was found in the trunk of the car, but it was not possible to establish its origin because this crucial evidence mysteriously evaporated during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution highlighted another curious detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper called emergency services several times, but each time dropped the call without waiting for an answer. He appeared afraid or uncertain about his actions. The man himself explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Clavin family stated that Agnes, in his opinion, was long dead and that her body was resting somewhere on the seabed in the very suitcase that the suspects had brought aboard the yacht. In addition, he believed that the case was deliberately delayed and that criminals had plenty of time to get rid of all evidence proving their guilt. Only a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance did Capper, Porter, and Usman find themselves in court. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, there was nothing more to charge them with. Moreover, even though many believed otherwise, the millionaire and his friend were released on bail and quietly left the courtroom. Naturally, Agnes's relatives were outraged by this decision, but the judge remained adamant. All three men were brought to trial again in 2019, almost 5 years after Agnes's disappearance. They still denied their guilt and insisted that Kavina had gotten into their car of her own free will. The prosecutor asked for Usman to be considered an accomplice to the crime because he helped drive away the victim. Usman could have received a sentence of 5 years in prison. He delivered a passionate speech, stating that he was among the suspects due to the color of his skin and the lack of opportunity to hire a good lawyer. The money he earned? It was sent to a starving family in Africa. Capper's and Porter's lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her. In their view, the young woman was dropped off on the road as she had requested. While waiting for a cab to go home, she could have been kidnapped and killed by third parties, given that Agnes was drunk and unable to offer much resistance. The judge's verdict surprised and angered the relatives of the missing young woman because none of the defendants were punished meaningfully. Usman was cleared of all charges. Capper received a sentence of 2 years for taking advantage of Agnes's drunken state to persuade her to get into his car. Porter received 6 months for complicity. In reality, neither man spent a single day in prison as their sentences were suspended. They paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation, a sum her family found ridiculous. Discouraged by the decision, Agnes's family appealed. During this time, both defendants managed to break the law once again. Capper, under the influence of alcohol and drugs, knocked down a woman and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also drunk, stole a car after beating its owner severely. Despite these serious crimes, Capper received only probation due to the expertly crafted defense by his lawyers. He paid substantial compensation to the family of the woman who died under his car's wheels and remained at large. Porter was less fortunate this time and ended up going to jail. There's no information available publicly about the sentence received in 2021, almost 7 years after Agnes's disappearance. The prime suspect, Wesley, had been living a rather immoral lifestyle, indulging in alcohol and illicit substances. This severely impacted his health. Just when he thought he had overcome the illness, he suffered a stroke. Wesley died on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnes's parents filed another appeal with the court. However, since the suspect is deceased, prosecution is no longer feasible. Regardless of what the Supreme Court decides in this challenging case, there was an unexpected twist 9 years later. Although Agnes Kavina was never found, dead or alive, she was presumed dead eventually. Subsequently, her parents, sister, and fiancé concurred with their lawyer's theory that criminals had placed Agnes's body in a suitcase and disposed of it into the sea from a yacht to ensure it wouldn't be discovered. In the summer of 2023, exactly 9 years after Agnes vanished without a trace, the case took another unexpected turn. In mid-June of that year, a gardener working at one of the elite golf clubs in Costa del Sol discovered something unusual near the coast while cleaning up. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be an old and badly damaged suitcase. Hesitant to open it himself, he called the police. Inside this suitcase were human remains. Examinations revealed that these bones belonged to a young woman whose age at death was approximately between 25 to 35 years old. Moreover, it was determined that this suitcase, with its contents, had been submerged underwater for about 10 years before being washed ashore. After piecing together all available information, police hypothesized that this body could belong to none other than Agnes Kavina, who disappeared 9 years ago. To verify this assumption conclusively requires several examinations comparing Agnes's DNA with those remains found in the suitcase. At present moment, experts are meticulously working on establishing these facts. However, details surrounding this investigation have not yet been made public. Megan Newton, born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, also had a stepsister named Demi. However, Megan primarily spent her time alongside her mother Sarah, forging an incredibly tight-knit bond akin to best friends. Megan kept no secrets from her mother, while Sarah, in return, would often consult her daughter, who displayed wisdom beyond her years on various significant issues. The woman characterized her daughter as highly ambitious, dynamic, and affable. Megan's friends described her as someone with an excellent sense of humor, compassionate, and thoughtful. Her grandparents remarked that she possessed a golden heart from a young age, always prepared to lend a hand to others. In her elementary school days, Megan encountered a new classmate, a girl whose family had recently relocated to England from China. The girl faced significant challenges in understanding the curriculum and interacting with peers due to her lack of English proficiency. Consequently, the teacher placed her beside Newton, hoping the compassionate and helpful Megan would assist the newcomer. Megan embraced this role wholeheartedly, overcoming the language barrier to aid her classmate and adjusting to a new environment. By the time the girl moved back to China, she had achieved a respectable level of English proficiency. Megan's kindness and open-mindedness persisted into her teenage years and adulthood, finding expression in her passion for sports. Soccer, in particular, captured her heart, leading her to join the Stoke-on-Trent women's soccer team. Additionally, she engaged in coaching, dedicating her weekends to training young girls under 7 years old instead of resting, striving for her Level 1 coaching badge. Megan aspired to secure a sports scholarship in the USA. Her commitment to sports, especially soccer, was so profound that she chose to pursue a career in it, even getting a small tattoo of a soccer cleat to express her love for the game. Upon completing her schooling, Megan embarked on her college journey, aiming to pursue her passion further. Megan Newton, a promising student aspiring to become a sports therapist or physiotherapist, was the first in her family to attend a tertiary education institution. Despite her potential for a bright future, her dreams were tragically cut short in the spring of 2019. Megan led a busy life, balancing 3 part-time jobs. On April 19th, a seemingly ordinary day, she finished work at a local fish and chip shop and headed home around 10:20 p.m. Living independently in her own apartment, Megan enjoyed her newfound autonomy. After getting ready, she joined friends for a night out at a club in Hanley, where they danced and had drinks. By Saturday morning, a grim discovery was made in her apartment: Megan's lifeless body, naked and covered in blood, a victim of a brutal stabbing. This horrific event deeply affected the community, who remembered Megan as a vibrant and charming young woman. The apartment paperwork and IDs conclusively identified the deceased as Megan Newton, a young woman who was brutally murdered in her bedroom. Megan's family was promptly notified by the police upon their arrival, and they had to face the heartbreaking task of identifying their daughter at the morgue. Megan, whom they had cared for with great love and recently allowed to live independently, met a tragic end that they never could have imagined, even in their worst nightmares. The crime scene was immediately secured, and forensic experts were sent to Megan's apartment to collect any potential evidence. The autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of the attack on Megan. She was strangled first, losing consciousness due to the lack of oxygen, and then she received 9 stab wounds to her back that punctured both her lungs. Furthermore, it was clear that she had been sexually assaulted. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Megan, was found nearby. The forensic pathologist concluded that it was these stab wounds that led to Megan Newton's untimely death. The bloodied knife and apartment keys were sent to the lab in the hope that DNA analysis could identify the assailant. It was believed that the culprit had accidentally dropped the keys while leaving Megan's apartment after the murder. The investigation began with detectives reconstructing the events leading up the tragic incident by talking to Megan's friends and family. It was determined that Megan had spent the evening at a club before taking a taxi home in the early hours of the morning. The investigative team reviewed surveillance footage from the area around the nightclub and the route Megan took to get home. Effort to trace her final movements and possibly pinpoint the assailant drew their attention to footage showing Megan boarding a taxi accompanied by a friend and an unidentified young man, raising questions about this individual's identity and potential role in the crime. Subsequent video from within Megan's apartment complex showed the same young man again, this time within the premises. Luckily, a camera positioned in the common hallway offered a clear view of the entrance to Megan's apartment, allowing officers to monitor who came and went that night. The goal was to identify the murderer by scrutinizing the video recordings from the evening of the incident. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Megan was seen entering her apartment building's lobby with the same young man she had shared a taxi ride with around an hour before. They proceeded together towards her apartment, with Megan appearing cheerful and exhibiting no signs of apprehension or unease around the individual. Upon reaching her door, Megan used her keys to unlock it, and they both went inside. However, a particular moment caught the detective's attention. While Megan was unlocking the door, the young man stood behind her, scanning the area and even making eye contact with the camera lens at one point. This behavior immediately raised suspicions among the police. They pondered whether the young man had premeditated harming Megan, possibly after coercing her into sexual acts, and was checking for potential witnesses. Further scrutiny of the video footage from the remainder of the night revealed a disturbing fact. Only the young man exited the apartment the following morning around 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he needed a special key fob to do so. He returned to Megan's apartment, momentarily retrieved the keys, and eventually managed to exit the building. The external surveillance captured him discarding an object where the blood-stained apartment keys would later be discovered by a neighbor. The most damning evidence of his involvement in Megan's death was obtained from another surveillance camera, which showed him walking away from the scene, inspecting one of his hands that appeared to be covered in blood. This critical piece of evidence marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. Identifying the young man as Joseph Trevor was swift due to a recent run-in with the law just the day before the tragic event. He had been arrested for possessing ketamine, a substance used both medically and in veterinary settings as an anesthetic and sometimes for pain management. The police officer who had apprehended Trevor immediately recognized him in the surveillance footage. Trevor, 18, hailed from a reputable family deeply rooted in the law enforcement community, with both his father and mother serving as police officers. He resided in a neighboring district and had a long-standing acquaintance with Megan Newton, as they had been high school classmates. Joseph led a seemingly typical life. He was academically successful and shared Megan's passion for sports, excelling in soccer to the extent of playing professionally for Newcastle Town and securing a sports scholarship in America with plans to relocate there after completing his studies. Like Megan, Joseph was pursuing higher education in Newcastle, poised for a promising future. To many who knew him, Trevor was perceived as a kind, affable, and sociable individual. Yet he harbored a less visible, volatile side to his character, capable of shifting from a jovial and engaging demeanor to one that was reclusive, brusque, and abrupt without any discernible trigger. This unpredictability left acquaintances unsure of which version of Joseph they would encounter on any given day. When the detectives in the Megan Newton case began to look more closely at Trevor's background, they came across some very unpleasant information about his past. Approximately 3 years earlier, at age 15, he was suspected of abusing another teenage girl because the attempt at intimate contact failed. He was not charged or punished. However, everyone around the school knew about the incident. After this incident, classmates at the school began to call Trevor a predator and child molester since the public arrest at the school could not go unnoticed. Now, for the police, this information became a warning because Megan was also subjected to forced sexual intercourse that night. Joseph Trevor was identified as the primary suspect in the assault case. Investigators focused on his movements that night. They already knew from surveillance footage that he was near the nightclub and got into the same taxi as Megan, later heading to her apartment with her. Detectives were unsure what Joseph Trevor did before arriving at Newton's home. They discovered that Joseph attended a party with school friends the previous evening. Coincidentally, they ended up in the same bar as Newton. Since they knew each other from school, they greeted each other and continued to enjoy their time separately. However, Joseph didn't stay long at the nightclub. Security noticed he had a packet of white powder and called the police. The squad that arrived detained Joseph and took him to the nearby police department. Despite his parents being in law enforcement, Joseph faced no legal repercussions. The officers unlocked his cuffs, seized the ketamine, and let him go, advising him to return home and avoid further drug use. Ignoring their advice, Joseph returned to the club where Megan was. He was denied entry, and around 2:40 a.m., he met Megan by the taxi queue. He shared his recent ordeal at the police station and his concern about facing his parents. Megan, always compassionate, let Joseph borrow her phone to contact a friend, but he couldn't find a place to stay. Seeing his distress, Megan invited Joseph to stay on her living room sofa. In the morning, once sober, he could decide how to approach his parents. Trevor gratefully agreed to Megan's offer, which explains why surveillance footage showed him entering a cab with Megan and her companion. He messaged his dad, falsely claiming he'd spend the night at a friend's place. The cab first dropped off Megan's companion before taking Megan and Trevor to her apartment on Fletcher Road. Surveillance recorded them entering the building and later captured Trevor discarding stained keys in the yard. Authorities believe that during those few hours, Trevor violently assaulted Megan, leading to her death. The evidence was clear, leaving Trevor with no way to dispute the accusations. Law enforcement was ready to apprehend him, and astonishingly, Trevor had already informed his parents about his role in Megan's death. After leaving the apartment just before dawn, Trevor went to a bridge over the A500 in Stoke-on-Trent. Sitting on the barrier with his legs hanging over, he seemed to be considering jumping. He perhaps sought an escape from the consequences of his deeds, contemplating suicide. Trevor had a history of depression and prior suicide attempts, and had been seen on this bridge before. A bystander noticed Trevor and promptly alerted the authorities. They arrived quickly and transported him to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. After evaluation, medical professionals deemed it safe for him to be discharged, and he returned home under the watchful eye of his father. Joseph revealed the whole truth to his mother. He could no longer carry the weight of his actions and was wary of the inevitable consequences of his deeds. After gathering his thoughts, he approached his mother and confessed his involvement in Megan Newton's death with the simple statement, "I did something bad." He also shared these confessions with a few of his friends, possibly driven by or other emotions, to admit to actions that couldn't be undone. Once Joseph's mother heard his admission, she quickly contacted the authorities to report his confession. However, by that time, the investigative team had already identified Joseph Trevor as their prime suspect through surveillance footage and were coordinating his arrest. The young man was taken to the police station for questioning, where he acknowledged being at Megan's residence that night, but couldn't provide details about the brutal attack. His account was consistent with surveillance footage showing their entry into her apartment. she had kindly offered him the couch for the night. Trevor claimed that their physical interaction was consensual and that after their intimacy, he blacked out. He had no memory of the subsequent events and couldn't clarify the specifics of the incident or his motivations. The only memory he retained from that night was Megan's apology. At 15, Trevor had also faced allegations of harassing a peer. He was ridiculed by his classmates, who labeled him with various derogatory terms. Some branded him a predator and charmer, and among them, Newton allegedly tagged him as Rolf Harris. According to Trevor's account, Ralph Harris, a famed Australian TV host, musician, and painter, was convicted of child abuse and other sexual offenses. These monikers deeply wounded Joseph throughout his youth. He endeavored to erase these bitter memories. Over time, Megan's apology for the schoolyard taunts abruptly revived these painful recollections, propelling him into a fit of anger. In that instant, he purportedly seized a knife. Nonetheless, the detectives dismissed his account, skeptical of his conveniently lapsing memory at a pivotal juncture. The law enforcement officers were persuaded that he was fully cognizant of his actions throughout. It's likely that Megan merely turned him away that evening. She offered him a place to stay out of friendship, recognizing his troublesome situation. Having known each other for years, attending the same school and now the same college, they shared numerous interests and aspirations for the future. Their mutual enthusiasm for soccer might have led her to believe it was safe to share her space with him overnight. Upon returning to the apartment, Joseph attempted to escalate their interaction to a more intimate level. Megan was not receptive and declined. This deeply frustrated Trevor, especially under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Disregarding her objections, he chose to use force in an effort to eliminate the risk of her reporting the incident. He decided to take drastic measures to ensure her silence permanently. Shortly after Megan Newton's tragic passing, Joseph Trevor faced charges for intentionally ending the life of his fellow student, along with committing 2 acts of sexual violence. The assault was discovered to have occurred in a manner involving multiple attacks. He was apprehended at his residence, and after several months the legal proceedings commenced, despite his initial partial admission. Joseph first refused to admit guilt, but later he changed his story. He acknowledged causing Megan's death, though he insisted the relations that night were consensual. He maintained this stance until the trial commenced on February 17, 2020. At the start of trial, he suddenly shifted his plea to guilty on all counts. This move seemed aimed at avoiding a lengthy trial, perhaps expecting that the jury would quickly dismiss his defense. As a result, Joseph received a life imprisonment sentence with eligibility for parole after a minimum of 21 years and 65 days. A dramatic moment unfolded in court when Trevor, during sentencing's conclusion, turned towards Sarah, Megan's mother, and silently mouthed, "Sorry." This action deeply infuriated her. Apologies at this juncture were meaningless and could neither amend the past nor alleviate the prolonged suffering Megan's family endured while awaiting trial. His belated apology appeared as an additional insult to the grieving mother. No apology could bring back Sarah's daughter or negate Joseph's heinous actions that night. The indifference Trevor displayed in surveillance footage post-incident, showing him nonchalantly leaving Megan's residence, underscored his lack of remorse. The irreversible harm inflicted on Megan and her family robbed them of future joys and milestones, leaving them burdened with lifelong sorrow. Megan's closest friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had plans to shop in Manchester the day after her passing. He was heartbroken upon learning of his friend's sudden loss and spent days in shock. However, in honor of Megan, he gathered himself and initiated a fundraising effort to assist with Newton family's funeral costs. His efforts successfully raised several thousand British pounds, which were handed over to Megan's mother. Megan had always been a pillar of support for those in distress. Now it was time for her supporters to reciprocate by providing emotional support and assistance to her family and all who cherished her brief yet impactful life. A fervent supporter of Stoke City Football Club, Megan was remembered by the team's players and passionate supporters who dedicated a minute of applause during a game in her honor. Her family and friends also collected funds to set up a commemorative bench in her memory at a serene park in Stoke-on-Trent. This bench overlooks a scenic pond and playground suitable for football, a tribute fitting for someone so interconnected with her community and beloved by all who knew her. In the Vicky Glass case, events unfolded unexpectedly. Vicky, a well-known figure in the city streets, became an enigma surrounded by unresolved questions. Her disappearance left behind numerous unsolved mysteries that concern everyone who has ever known her. Friday, September 24, 2021, marked the 21st anniversary of Vicky's tragic death. The police utilized this occasion to appeal to the public for new information. Following a thorough analysis of existing data, a new team led by Senior Supervisor Peter Carr will renew efforts into investigating her disappearance. Carr informed reporters that over the past year, extensive materials have been reviewed. They plan to interrogate all individuals potentially connected with this case and promised to employ innovative solutions. He emphasized that Vicky did not deserve such a fate, and her family deserves closure regarding what transpired. The police launched a website containing information about Vicky, details of her life and disappearance, as well as updates on the investigation's progress. In early November 2022, they received new surveillance footage showing Vicky on the day she disappeared. Carr addressed a press conference to discuss these new findings. The video depicted Vicky conversing with a man who sold washing machines. The police are appealing to the public for assistance in identifying this individual. Let us examine this mysterious figure named Vicky, whose life remains enshrouded in unanswered questions and secrets. On September 21, 1979, in Stockton-on-Tees, a small town nestled in the northeast of England on the banks of the rivers, Vicky was born. She had an older sister named Claire, who was just a year senior. Their parents, Deborah and Anthony, divorced when Vicky was only 6 years old. Following the separation, Deborah remarried to a man named Colin Goodall. With this marriage, Vicky gained an older half-sister named Cheryl and a younger brother called Thomas. Despite these additions to their family dynamic, they continued residing in Stockton. As a child, Vicky exhibited a profound interest in music. She admired Michael Jackson and had a particular fondness for the musical Cats. Between the ages of 13 and 18, she participated in a local jazz band and frequently performed alongside friends from that band, which brought her much joy. After completing her education at Blackstone High School, Vicky pursued further studies at an academy where she impressively earned 5 diplomas of higher education. However, and quite unexpectedly, her life took an entirely different path afterward. At 18 years old, an age characterized by both excitement and uncertainty, Vicky encountered significant problems after falling into bad company. Consequently, she became addicted to illegal substances, a situation that led her to work as a sex worker in order to finance this addiction. It is documented that she worked primarily in Cannon Park and Gresham areas of Middlesbrough, near her hometown. In 1999, a challenging year for many reasons, Vicky found herself homeless and severely ill with pneumonia. During this difficult period, her friend introduced her to Patch Claus, who generously offered temporary shelter so she could recover properly. She stayed with him for several months, during which time he cared for her diligently, providing necessary medications as well as support services aimed at aiding recuperation efforts. Unfortunately, even such thoughtful assistance couldn't curb or change Vicky's ongoing addiction or alter what had become an increasingly destructive lifestyle up until that point. On Saturday, September 23, 2000, just a few days following her 21st birthday, Vicky and her friend departed from Patch Claus's residence around noon. Vicky was observed in the vicinity of Cannon Park in Gresham, where, according to some accounts, she was accompanying a client. Later that day, she met with another client on Set Road in Middlesbrough. Together, they proceeded to Main Road, an address recognized for activities involving illegal substances and escort services. After spending some time at this location, Vicky and her client exited the premises and hailed a taxi on the street, close to Union Street. The taxi transported them to the man's home in Norton, approximately 3 miles away from their starting point. Vicky stayed briefly at this residence before calling another taxi to return to Middlesbrough. She consistently utilized the same taxi company's services. A white Vauxhall Vectra with registration number 790 arrived to pick her up at 4 a.m. on Sunday, September 24th. Vicky disembarked from the taxi around 4:20 a.m. at the intersection of Union Street and Ashwood Square, next to a pub known as Colleague. From there, it was only about a 5-minute walk to Patch Claus's house where she resided. However, she never reached home that night. The man who had been expecting her began worrying when she did not return and started contacting friends and visiting known hangouts, but without success. 3 days later, on September 27th, he contacted law enforcement authorities, which initiated an investigation into her disappearance. The subsequent week, on October 5th, the Northern Echo published an article headlined, "Disappearance of a Young Woman." In this piece, Vicky was described as being 5'3", tall with blonde hair tied back in a ponytail and speaking the local language fluently. She had been last seen wearing a white t-shirt paired with light gray trousers and white sneakers. The article also included comments from police officials noting that Vicky was known locally as a sex worker. The article reported that authorities and police were deeply concerned for her safety, but did not link Vicky's disappearance to the murder of another sex worker, Kelly Masson, who was found strangled in the same vicinity. Though Kelly and Vicky both engaged in the escort business and struggled with illegal substances, their cases were not connected. A man named Sean Thu received a life sentence for Kelly Masson's murder. However, he was not tied to Vicky's vanishing. In the early hours of November 2000, a local resident stumbled upon decomposing remains of a young woman on the outskirts of a village in Yorkshire, North England. These remains belonged to a 21-year-old woman who had gone missing 6 weeks prior from Middlesbrough, approximately 20 miles away. Subsequent years involved investigations into numerous brutal crimes. Vicky's family remained resolute in uncovering those responsible. In 2018, additional funds were allocated to assist police efforts in finding the perpetrator. On Friday, November 3rd at around 6 a.m., while walking his dog in Demi, a village situated about 20 miles southeast of Middlesbrough, a local resident discovered severely decomposed body parts of an unclothed female near a roadside ditch running through the village center. Police soon arrived at the scene and identified the victim as Vicky Glass, aged 21 and recently reported missing. The cause of death wasn't determined immediately. North Yorkshire and Cleveland police promptly initiated an investigation involving a team of 40 officers examining evidence through forensic examinations and documenting information regarding Vicky's last activities. Unfortunately, no clues surfaced at the site itself, nor were any articles of clothing found that she had been wearing last. Detective Brian Dan led this investigation effort and requested journalists reach out to anyone familiar with or having communicated with Vicky if they possessed helpful information. Given Demi's status as a well-known tourist destination, appeals specifically targeted visitors potentially present during relevant time span. Authorities urged residents to observe if any vehicles might have paused along roadsides before entering Demi, possibly linked to how Vicky was transported. On November 13, 2000, Vicky's mother, Deborah, addressed the media to urge witnesses to step forward with any information they might have. The following week, photographs of Vicky were displayed in the pub where she was last seen and in other city areas frequented by sex workers. By November 20th, police had questioned over 500 individuals and received 150 testimonies. Among these were former clients of Vicky and drivers from the Cannon Park overnight parking lot, a known spot for sex workers like her. A few days later, detectives expressed disappointment to local journalists regarding the public's limited response, especially after Deborah's heartfelt plea. On November 3rd, another police petition noted that numerous witnesses had come forward after investigators reviewed more than 70 hours of surveillance tape from Middlesbrough city center. It was reported that no substantial info had been received from these appeals. The police hadn't confirmed contact with all witnesses either. As Christmas approached, Tony Glass, Vicky's father, and Colin Goodale, her stepfather, visited the site where her body was found and placed flowers on her grave. They made another plea for residents to provide any useful information to help catch the culprit. Holding back tears, both men urged people not to hide what they knew and immediately contact authorities. Deborah was too distraught to attend the ceremony, but continued hoping for leads on her daughter's disappearance. Investigations extended into the next year. Police indicated that about a dozen sex workers potentially held crucial info regarding Vicky's case. In March of that same year, law enforcement intensified monitoring of truck drivers stopping at Cannon Park's parking area, subsequently arresting a 39-year-old man from Grimsby who remained anonymous and released on bail. Efforts persisted as detectives examined transportation documents aiming to trace truckers present in Middlesbrough during the relevant weekend window. Detective Brian Dan disclosed they were able to analyze records from more than 100 companies while interviewing all identified former partners and clients of Vicky, information obtained via other sex workers' accounts. One prominent suspect emerged, a stocky male around age 34 to 38, possessing a mole on his left cheek with thick blonde or graying hair, reportedly involved in transporting household goods such as washing powder and washing machines. The investigation carried on through Sunday morning of September 24th, just past Vicky's disappearance date in September, leaving everyone determined, but still searching for concrete answers. Witnesses observed him exiting the truck. Additionally, on the evening of September 23rd, he gave $10 to Vicky, but kept her with her belongings as a guarantee that she would come back for them. On January 9, 2002, police apprehended a 47-year-old man suspected of being involved in Vicky's murder. The identity of this individual was initially withheld from the public. However, 2 days after his arrest, on January 11th, it was revealed that his name was Eric Coates. He resided in southern North Yorkshire, approximately 45 miles south of Middlesbrough. Despite these developments, Coates was released without any charges being filed against him. This marked the third occasion Mr. Coates had been interrogated concerning Vicky's disappearance. During an extensive search of his residence, where he lived with his parents, the authorities seized clothes, diaries, videotapes, and a car. All these items were subsequently confiscated by the police. Several properties in Scarborough, a coastal town about 50 miles southeast of Middlesbrough, belonging to Coates's father Raymond, were also subject to searches by law enforcement officials. Police reported that Mr. Coates could not provide an alibi for his whereabouts on the day Vicky vanished, though he claimed he likely remained at home since it was his father's birthday. Later on, Mr. Coates gave an interview to the Northern Echo newspaper, where he suggested that Vicky died amid conflicts with illicit substance dealers and asserted that he had been wrongfully branded a liar because he couldn't remember details clearly. It emerged that Mr. Coates often availed himself of services provided by sex workers and had previously been a client of Vicky's too. In addition to denying involvement in her death due to any debts related to illegal substances, as rumored, he stated emphatically that such a violent end shouldn't befall anyone, and voiced hopefulness about justice eventually being served through finding the true perpetrators. In April 2002, the police informed Mr. Coates that they were not going to charge him in connection with Vicky's murder. The Northern Echo interviewed him, and he expressed a desire to return to normalcy. While police will refrain from publicly linking him to Vicky's case again, it is important to note his previous convictions. In 1994, Eric Coates was jailed for 15 months after being convicted by Teesside Court for kidnapping and assaulting a sex worker in Middlesbrough. Additionally, he was acquitted of attempted abuse and indecent assault on the same woman. In June 2006, Eric Coates received a 14-year prison sentence, after pleading guilty to committing 15 intimate crimes against girls aged 11 to 14 and a single mother of 3 children. At the same time, Eric's father, Raymond Coates, then in his 70s, was charged with 12 counts of sexual harassment, but was deemed too sick to stand trial. Raymond has neither been officially acquitted nor convicted of any crimes up until now. This marked the second occasion on which Raymond had been excused from standing trial for serious charges involving one of his sons. In 2003, Philip Nigel Coates received a jail sentence of 13 years after being found guilty of 3 charges related to coercing a woman into an intimate relationship with his father, attempted brokerage, which is just baffling, and inciting her to commit severe intimate acts involving animals. Despite claims regarding his health conditions, Raymond Coates resided in North Yorkshire until he passed away in 2015. Information about his sons remains shielded from public scrutiny at present. Following Eric Coates' exoneration in July 2002 from all charges related to Vicky's case, Cleveland police announced their intention to question John Taylor, a man sentenced to life imprisonment for the kidnapping and murder of Leanne Tiernan in Leeds, West Yorkshire. The divorced father of 2 had kidnapped Tiernan while she shopped downtown on Christmas Eve in December 2000 and subsequently strangled her at his residence. Her body was discovered 9 months later by Inspector Jim Tate of Cleveland Police, who stated that they would closely monitor developments pertaining John Taylor, yet no further announcements linked him with Vicky's case subsequently emerged. In September 2002, Vicky's mother Deborah once again appealed to the media for information in connection with the 2nd anniversary of her daughter's death. During her speech, she said that she thought about taking her own life because of the unbearable pain she has to endure. The investigation into Vicky's case slowed down until the following year when a 2nd investigation began. Back in August 2003, the forensic expert who conducted the autopsy on Vicky's body stated he couldn't determine the cause of death. The main issue? Her body had decomposed significantly, and many parts were missing, including vital and several bones. It was established there were no signs of injuries, nor any indication that Vicky had been mistreated. Warren Michael Oakley issued an open verdict, with news agencies quoting him, "We don't know how she ended up where she was found, we don't know the cause of death, and we don't know if anyone was involved in her death." Later that year, Vicky's mother Deborah and stepfather Colin went to Demi, where her body was discovered, to lay flowers. Reporters from ITV channel joined them and filmed a brief 20-second video. In it, Deborah appeared visibly distressed as she mentioned how unjust it felt for Vicky to die this way, and spoke about her daughter's declining happiness after encountering substance issues. Sadly, without major breakthroughs in the investigation, people began to forget about the case. In November 2004, though, Detective Brian Dan assured everyone that the investigation wasn't closing. Efforts would continue. Fast forward to December 2006, Cleveland police informed media outlets they intended to collaborate with Suffolk police regarding possible connections between Vicky's disappearance and the deaths of 5 sex workers near a town just south of Middlesbrough. Those victims were all discovered within 2 weeks, starting October 30th that year. 2 had been strangled, while causes for others remained undetermined. By December 21st came an arrest. Stephen Gerald James Wright was taken into custody on December 19th and charged with all 5 murders. Dubbed the Suffolk Strangler, Wright faced trial and in February 2008 received a life sentence without parole after being found guilty on all counts. In the days following the sentencing, various newspapers reported that Cleveland police would keep investigating Stephen Wright in connection with Vicky. This was despite the distance between the crime scenes and where Vicky was found. It's worth noting that Wright, a trucker, caught Cleveland police's interest since they had previously appealed to truck drivers and transportation companies many times. However, no further claims emerged linking Wright to Vicky's case. On September 24, 2010, marking the 10th anniversary of Vicky's death, Her parents were scheduled to speak to reporters about their emotional turmoil from a decade-long search for justice. Her mother, Deborah, expressed that she thinks about Vicky daily and struggles with this loss. Tony, her father, revealed he lost his job and could no longer walk around alone or focus on anything. Gordon Lamp from Cleveland Police mentioned that despite 10 years passing without any significant discoveries, they remain committed to finding the criminal. Despite new requests for information, nothing new has come in. In December 2010, Vicky's case was linked to other crimes by Stephen Griffiths, known as the Crossbow Cannibal. Arrested on May 24, 2010 for murdering 3 sex workers in Bradford, capturing worldwide attention, Griffiths admitted his guilt and received life imprisonment without parole for these crimes. Reports indicated he consumed parts of his victims' bodies and disposed of other remains in garbage bags thrown into a lake. After pleading guilty in December 2010 and receiving life sentences for multiple murders before his arrest, as well as several additional offenses, police examined Griffiths' activities since age 14 to possibly connect him with other unsolved crimes. By January 2011, though, it became clear Griffiths didn't kill Vicky, according to police confirmation. As time went on, except annual appeals around each anniversary, the media started covering this case less frequently, regrettably, until sadly, when Deborah passed away at age 55, unsure how her daughter's life ended or who bore responsibility was. In 2017, the Cleveland Police, along with Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger, sought a special grant from the Department of Home Affairs to fund investigations into 3 cold cases, including Vicky Glass's. These cases also involved 2 young women from Middlesbrough. One of them was 17-year-old Donna Mary Keogh, who went missing in May 1998. She had last been seen in Middlesbrough a month earlier. Even though no body was found, it is believed she was murdered. In 2015, Deputy Chief Constable Ian Spence of Cleveland Police apologized to Donna's family for shortcomings in the original investigation. However, only a year later, October 17, 2016, after an independent review of Donna's case, Cleveland Police began investigating her disappearance and suspected murder again. Despite a 20-year inquiry, no one has ever been charged with Donna Mary Keogh's murder. The third case for which Cleveland Police sought extra funding concerned the murder of Rachel Wilson in 2002 at age 19. She was last seen on May 31st of that year and, like Vicky Glass, had unfortunately resorted to sex work due to severe addiction issues. On June 27, 2012, parts of Rachel's body were discovered on a farm near Colby in Middlesbrough. By April 2018, Cleveland Police had secured the requested grant funds, and Barry Coppinger remarked that he always thinks about families who are left without answers regarding their loved ones' deaths when dealing with such cases. The grant amounted to nearly £4 million and significantly aided these unsolved crime investigations. Assistant Chief Constable Jason Harwin mentioned that similarities exist among the victims' ages and where they disappeared from, but noted it was too early then to declare any definitive links between the cases. These crimes remain unsolved. Do you recall Vicky Glass's story? Her disappearance marked its beginning. However, why she was killed still poses questions today. Now there's a notable new suspect, Christopher Halliwell. This individual already has 2 murders attributed to him, Cyan O'Callaghan and Becky Godden Edwards being his known victims, and could be connected to Vicky's vanishing as well. It's like something out of horror flicks, but it's all too real. In October 2018, the North Yorks Inquirer news site featured an extensive article suggesting that another well-known convicted criminal might be linked to Vicky's disappearance. This individual is also considered a suspect in 2 other unsolved cases. The article was part of a broader series about the potential victims of Christopher Halliwell, a former taxi driver from Swindon responsible for 2 significant crimes. One of Halliwell's victims was Cyan O'Callaghan, a 22-year-old office worker. She went missing during a night out with friends in Swindon in March 2011. After bidding farewell to her friends, she got into a taxi and was subsequently killed by Halliwell. Police were led to Halliwell through surveillance camera footage. He was arrested shortly thereafter and eventually directed police to her burial site. Her body was found in a shallow grave in Oxfordshire. Following this discovery, Halliwell confessed to another murder committed 8 years earlier. He provided detectives with information on where they could locate the body of Becky Godden Edwards. Becky had last been seen alive getting into a taxi outside a nightclub in Swindon in January 2003. Halliwell later stabbed her multiple times and then strangled her. The North Yorks Inquirer News piece underscored concerns that Halliwell may be connected to additional unsolved disappearances beyond those already attributed to him. Such reports contribute valuable information, both direct evidence and investigative leads, for ongoing efforts aiming at resolving these troubling cases. In October 2012, Halliwell pleaded guilty to the murder of Sen O'Callaghan and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25. However, since Halliwell wasn't allowed to speak with his lawyer before confessing to the murder, the judge found the case inadmissible. Consequently, all charges were dropped. New evidence came to light in 2001, indicating that Halliwell had been previously found guilty of Becky's murder. It is widely believed that Christopher Halliwell is responsible for numerous crimes. The article concludes that all 3 women from unsolved cases align with Halliwell's victim preference. Furthermore, both Rachel Wilson and Vicky Glass were sex workers, and Halliwell utilized their services. Perhaps because of this connection, he worked as a taxi driver in Middlesbrough's center. Halliwell traveled across the country, seeking work as a construction worker and taxi driver. He resided in various cities. His father presumably lived around York. Middlesbrough was about an hour's drive from York via the A19 highway. Halliwell had a keen interest in fishing and traveled extensively for it. The River Tees offers numerous excellent fishing spots, including the Staunch, near where Vicky Glass's body was discovered. Fishing would provide an appropriate excuse for him to frequent the area and commit crimes. There is no information online suggesting that police have officially linked Halliwell to Vicky's case. In 2021, Cleveland police closed one of 3 unsolved cases after a 62-year-old man confessed to Rachel Wilson's manslaughter. Kate Hall introduced Rachel to illegal substances shortly after they met when she was 15 years old and then coerced her into escort work to finance their addiction together. He had been under police investigation for several years and had carried a lock of Rachel's hair in his wallet throughout that time. Ultimately, he received an 18-and-a-half-year prison sentence. Presently, Vicky's death remains unexplained, a source of unbearable pain for her family and friends, who continue searching tirelessly for answers, though they remain elusive thus far. Her loved ones are deeply distressed by what befell their dear Vicky. We can only hope that one day they will find peace and truth shall finally prevail.